Baseball fans, it is time once again for another episode of Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. With over 50 years in professional baseball and making a multitude of fantastic relationships along the way, Frank Coppenbarger shares great stories with weekly guests from various areas inside of the game. Let's get ready to play ball. Here's Frank Coppenbarger.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. Got a really cool guest this week. 51 years with the Philadelphia Phillies. Started out on the junior ground crew. Worked on the ground crew for an awful long time. Did some other things in the organization. And the last 2 or 3 decades, he was the stadium operations and facilities director. Mr. Mike Dimuzio. Mike, welcome.
Thanks, Frank. Glad to be here.
Good to have you with us. Mike's a Philly lifer for sure. As I said, 51 years with the ball club. And I think only the cats that used to roam around that veteran stadium spent more hours there than you, buddy.
Yeah, it might have been tied, myself and the cats.
It was close. There's no doubt about it.
I moved over to the new ballpark. I don't think the Cats ever made it over.
They probably didn't make it. We don't want to talk about how they met their demise, I don't think. But I do want to talk about, how did you get started with the Phillies? How'd that all come about?
Phillies were moving from Connie Mack Stadium to Veterans Stadium, and for some reason, Pat Cassidy, who at that time was the director of stadium operations, decided to They wanted to supplement the older groundskeepers who were coming from Connie Mack with a bunch of young kids to help with the tarps, clean around the bases, things like that. And for some reason, the Phillies decided to go to my high school, Bishop Newman High School at the time, and draft 15 or 16 kids in high school to go work. In addition to that, I had, obviously, because they were moving to South Philly, had put an application in because I lived down there as well. But anyway, I happened to be one of the 15 or 16 guys chosen. By June of that year, 14 of us had said, or 14 of the 16 said, the hell with this, I want to go down ashore. So they quit. I was one of 2 remaining. Pat then went to West Catholic High School, and we picked up a bunch of kids from West Catholic High School. And after the first year and a half, I was the only one of 16 remaining. And 51 years later, I called it quits.
So it was definitely a family affair in your house, but were you the first Dimuzio to actually work for the Phillies?
I was not. My brother Tom went to the University of Delaware, and during one summer, may have been 2 summers, Keith Carpenter and Ruley Carpenter, who were very tied into the University of Delaware, got a couple of guys, Tom, my brother Tom, and the late Chuck Hall, to come down and work for the Phillies during the summer for Tom Hudson and Frank Sullivan. So Tommy was the first one at Connie Mack Stadium, and then I was the second, and then it seemed like the entire Dimuzio clan followed me after that.
Yeah, talk about them. Mention them all.
Okay, well, my mom started working for the old Nylon Brothers concessionaire. Mom worked for them until they changed name to Ogden. And then after Ogden, it became Aramark. She continued with them. But then the Phillies saw, I guess, what they thought was a very good employee. And the Phillies ended up hiring her in our merchandising department. And she worked until, God rest her soul, her passing, for 33 years. My dad was a retired government worker. One night I got stuck and I was looking for a midnight security guard and asked him if he would mind staying awake at the front desk at Veterans Stadium. My dad ended up doing that for 12 years. My brother David is still he's my youngest of 5 brothers. David is still working down there, helping out the merchandising department. My brother Danny, the next above David, Danny worked for almost 30 years for the ground crew as well. My brother Mark sold programs when I was involved with the program vendors. My brother Teddy, for a very short time, was a bartender in one of the super boxes. So all in all, every Dimuzio made it. My wife was a hot pants girl way back when they had the hot pants girls. I met her at the University of Delaware, and then she became a hot pants girl. So we've had a number of Dimuzios, as some families have had a number of their family members as well.
Absolutely. That was a pretty common thing with the Phillies, especially 25, 30 years ago. No doubt about it. And you were one of the first Philly employees that I met when I moved to Philadelphia in '89. And I sure do remember your dad, Ted, at the front desk, and your brothers, most of your brothers, and of course your mom. And you all have an award that you give every year in the name of your mother, Penny. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, when my mom passed in 2014, we decided, my mom always worked with interns in the merchandising department. It seemed every time there was an intern that came on, they either went to the sales office or they went to the merchandising department. And my mom kind of took the intern under her wing like she did her 6 boys, and just became another family member to her. So when mom passed, we decided that we would give a monetary stipend to the intern who was voted on by a committee of Phillies employees, not me. I didn't want anybody to think I had favorites. So there's a couple of departments who the heads of their departments get together and choose, so to speak, the intern of the year. And that person is given a monetary stipend as well as what they now call the Penny Award every year at their annual holiday party.
That's very good. Very good. So, and certainly a woman most deserving of being remembered always like that. Mike, talk about when you first started on the ground crew. Talk about what it was like, brand new veteran stadium. And then I want to ask you a few things about the ground crew area and some of the funny stuff that might have gone on back in the day.
Well, when I started, I'm a 17-year-old kid still in high school, and my eyes were like silver dollars. I mean, I get to walk around and am very close in proximity to all of these baseball heroes that everybody looked up to. And for me as a kid to do that, it was just mind-blowing. And how the other 14 guys decided, I don't want to be part of this. I don't know what their mentality was there, but to me, what more could I ask for? I wasn't going down the shore for the summer. So I worked at UPS from 1 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the morning, went home and took a couple hours sleep, and then went into the ballpark and worked till 1, and then went directly from the vet back over to UPS. So, and I thought it was the greatest job in the world. And I got to meet a lot of players. I got to meet, obviously, the owners. Ruley Carpenter sat down with the ground crew in the home plate tunnel every game. He didn't want to sit up in a luxury box and talk with, not that he didn't want to, his baseball was in his blood, and it wasn't to entertain corporate sponsors. So Ruley sat down with the ground crew, and to be able to sit with the owner of the team and talk baseball, there was nothing like it.
Absolutely. So now you had a wall back there in the ground crew lounge area, and a lot of famous people signed that wall over the years. Talk about that tradition. How'd that all come about, and name a few people that you can recall that were on there.
Gary Tinnany, again, God rest his soul. Gary Tinnany was a member of the grounds crew. Gary came to the Phillies, I believe, in 1976, because I had gone to Clearwater in 75. Gary went in 76. I went back in 77. But Gary was a very, very outgoing individual. He was not afraid to walk up and say hello to anyone, whether it was a coworker, whether it was a president of one of the biggest corporations in Philly, whether it was the president of the United States. Gary thought everybody was his best friend. So Gary got to talking to all the players. They became his best buddy. Gary started the wall. Hey, look, we need you to come in here, and just to say that you were here, I need you to sign the wall. So Gary got the likes of Greg Lazinski and Steve Carlton. And every Philly that played back in the 70s was on one wall. And then Gary decided, you know what, let's see if we can get some visiting players. And Gary would just walk in the dugout and grab a guy by his arm, Manny Sanguillen from the Pirates. Hey, Manny, I need you to come sign the wall. And then the players started hearing about the wall, and players wanted to sign the wall because they knew the names that were on there were some very special names. But you had to pass Gary's check to get there. And there were quite a few people that Gary said, no, you're not worthy of being here. So he ended up getting umpires. He ended up getting movie stars, TV stars. Kelsey Grammer was on there. Don Drysdale was on there. Howard Cosell was on there when he came in for a Monday night football game. Gary went and grabbed Howard Cosell and had Howard come in and sign the wall. So there were some great names. The hope was that at least some of those blocks would move over with us to Citizens Bank Park. Saw cut a few blocks out and bring them over and carry on the tradition. Unfortunately, my wish didn't reach the right ears, and the wall went down with the vet.
Well, I tell you what, it kind of sounds like the tradition of signing the inside of the Green Monster at Fenway Park a little bit.
It's exactly what it was. It's exactly what it was. It was a place that players, like I said, they heard about it. They wanted to come in and sign it, and you had to get Gary's blessing in order to get the Sharpie, because if not, you weren't on the wall.
Well, speaking of players that used to come in there in the ground crew area and hang out, nobody more famous than new Hall of Famer, as of a couple years ago, Dick Allen, who was a great friend to all of the ground crew guys. Talk about Dick Allen a little bit, Mike.
Dick Allen, I met through the older groundskeepers. When Dick first came in to the vet, he wasn't a member of the Phillies. And the groundskeepers, the older guys, Freddie and Barney and Wimpy and Joe Boyle and Vic, all those guys that came from Connie Mack Stadium, I remember them like they were in my house yesterday. They talked about what kind of guy Dick Allen was and how Dick looked after the so-called little people. And Dick's first visit every trip into the vet was to the ground crew room before he even got to the locker room. And I guess I can say it now, Dick's no longer with us. God rest his soul, and congrats that he's in the Hall of Fame. But Dick would stop in, and if I said he had a soda, it looked like a soda to me anyway. And even if it was before the game. And Dick would come in and just, how are you? How you been? How you feel? How's your family? And Dick got to know my family through conversations like that, as he did with other members of the ground crew. And I grew very, very close to Dick. As a matter of fact, unfortunately, when his daughter was killed, Gary, Froggy Carfagno, and myself went to the funeral. I even went to Dick's agent, Clem Capizzoli, when Clem passed away. My grandmother knew the family, and as Italians do in South Philly, all the Italians go to the viewing. So I took my grandmother, and Dick remembered that I was at the funeral home for his agent. And when my mom and my dad both passed, Dick flew in from out of town to attend the funeral. As a matter of fact, Dick came in to be a pallbearer for Gary Tinney during his funeral. So that's the kind of guy Dick was, where he looked out for the little guy, and spent many, many, many hours with Dick Allen.
A gentleman that definitely got a bad rap sometimes, and unfairly, because if you got to know the guy, which I was lucky enough to get to know him a little bit, nothing like you guys, but he was super guy, fun to be around. And
he really was. Even when he came back to Citizens Bank Park, his first stop, he got to know where my office was, up in the upper level, on the suite level. And Dick's first stop was there because Dick knew that I had bourbon in my office. Dick knew that I would let him smoke in my office. He wasn't allowed to do that anywhere else. And we had some cold beers. And sometimes Dick forgot why he came to Citizens Bank Park, and we spent a better time of 2 or 3 hours just talking in the office. But that's the kind of guy Dick was.
Just a couple of the crazy antics that used to happen on opening day, a couple of your more memorable ones, and how that came into play in your area in the ground crew and later stadium ops areas. Talk about like Benny the Bomb or Walenda or any of those guys, if you could.
Yeah, they weren't necessarily all opening day acts. It was just whenever Bill Giles got an idea, whether it was April or May or September, and Bill would think, this is the act that I want. So we did Walenda twice. And the thing that amazed me about Walenda is that he had the ushers and security guards. Basically, they were the tethers for his cable that was hanging from the right field foul pole towards the left field foul pole. And he walked out on the wire and sat down on the wire about 100 feet or 150 feet into the walk, and then directed the ushers and security guards to pull the wire tighter, to pull their ropes tighter, and then got up and, made his walk across. The thing that people don't realize, from up on the roof where I was, there was a dip in that wire about 30 or 40 feet. So when he got over second base and he was in the middle, he now had an incline that he had to go back up to get to the walkway on the other side. And he did that twice. And again, not thinking that, God forbid, what should happen if there's an accident here. Nobody ever thought of that. So Bill did other high wire acts with the Lemoynes. John and Michelle Lemoyne did a bicycle act. They did that at Citizens Bank Park, where they rode up on a motorcycle and then spun around on the motorcycle and then came backwards. Michelle did a slide for life down the wire from the left field foul pole down to the left field, or the visiting team dugout. Benny the Bomb was a classic at the Vet. Benny would put himself in a box, and it was basically masonite. It wasn't any plywood or any oak or anything like that. It was meant to explode into pieces. And Benny would get up after the bomb exploded at second base and hold his head and stumble all the way into the dugout, into the tunnel behind home plate, and then walk up and ask for his check and head home. So,
what a way to make a living.
Oh yeah, stork races. They had the ostrich races they had, where the ostriches got away and ran wild. Every year the circus came in town at the Spectrum. Bill would have the circus in town. We'd get clowns and we'd get elephants and the unicyclist and all that. And invariably the elephants would, when they went to turn them around at the dugout, they thought the dugout was their bathroom trough. And a few times we filled the dugouts with items that players didn't really need in there.
Right. So let's talk about one of your main areas, weather. Bad weather coming. Chance for rain. Talk about what that's like when you were in that position. What was it like? Who was in the meeting? Who decided the game was called or not? Talk about it.
Well, when I originally got put in that position about being someone concerned with weather, as I was the facility person and technically the ground crew was involved in the ballpark operations department. So that's where I came in. It was myself and Dave Montgomery only. And the two of us decided what's the weather going to be. We had a guy from the Schuylkill Valley Nature Center, Dick James, that we would call Dick, and Dick would have all the weather updates and all the gear, all the computers, and tell us what the weather was. And David and I decided we'd either wait or we wouldn't wait. And there was a thing way back when, the older ball players, even years before that I learned through Major McDonald, is when the team's going well, you sit and wait out a rain delay. And when the team's not going well and it's an excuse for them to have a day off and go home and rest and forget about the losses, you cancel the game. So David and I were the only two that decided. I'd go down and talk to the manager and say, this is where we are. We're going to wait 45 minutes. We're going to wait an hour and a half, and then we'll make a decision. And that's the way it was.
Right.
It then became much bigger than that because then the visiting team, obviously, they wanted to know about their pitcher. So the assistant GM, Ruben, got involved back then. He would have to go down and talk to the managers. I got away from talking to the coaches. But then PR wanted to know, then marketing wanted to know, because they had sponsors who would come in that night and whether they were going to have their sponsor dinner or not have their sponsor dinner. Marketing got involved. Ticketing got involved. And we ended up with like 14-person meetings. And the ultimate for me was when Major League Baseball got involved. And New York, people in New York were trying to tell us what our weather was and whether we could play or not. And that's when I told my boss at that time, Howard Smith, I'm out of it. You guys decide, and you tell me whether we're going to cancel or not, because I don't need somebody in New York to tell me whether it's raining in Philadelphia.
Well, that's how it goes sometimes. Speaking of rain in Philadelphia, and you mentioned Bill Giles, former owner and chairman of the Phillies, and also David Montgomery. When I was working in the umpires room in St. Louis before I was a Philly, I remember one night, now remember those games are played in Central Time, and Philadelphia on the East Coast, Eastern Time, so the Phillies started at least 1 hour ahead of the Cardinal games. Well, I remember one night the game ended in St. Louis, and the umpires came in, and of course I didn't know anything about Philadelphia other than the Phillies and who their players were and all that. And one of the umpires said, I see Giles is up to his old tricks again, beating Bill Giles. And they said, yeah, there's been like a 3-hour rain delay, and the game in the Midwest was already over. So, you know, they were kind of known, I guess, for maybe having a long delay once in a while. And, of course, you know, the umpires, they didn't want to do that if they didn't have to.
The umpires, there used to be a rule where they had to wait 35 minutes before they could call a game. Even
Right.
if I walked out and told the umpire, look, it's going to be, basically you're going to need Noah's Ark to get out of here.
Right.
And they'd have to wait the given amount of time before they could cancel the game. While it was still in the hands of the team, which was prior to the lineups being exchanged at home plate, it was up to the Phillies, whether it was Bill or David, whether we were going to wait or not. Right. There were times where it was raining very hard, and David would tell me to have the ground crew take the tarp off the field because with all the water hitting the puddles on the tarp, it looks like it's raining hard. And we don't want the fans to think it's raining hard. And I used to say to David, it looks like it's raining hard because it is.
Right.
And if we take the tarp off the field, we may not get it back on because it's going to be that heavy. So there are things like that, you know, that people wouldn't necessarily believe that those conversations went on. But that was the mentality of let's do everything we can to play. And I finally became, it became a thing to me that, and I always say this to Ruben now, and Ruben would ask me, what about the rain? And I would say, Ruben, when it starts, we stop. and when it stops, we start. That's basically what it is. So I can't tell you, it's weather. It's
Right.
weather, and nobody can predict it. So if you see a line coming in and it's going to rain, it might get 30 miles from Philly, and then the line breaks up. So it's hard to hold the game up for weather that's coming in. Game starts at 7:05. There was rarely a time that we would hold a game till 7:30 because we knew a line of rain was coming in at 7:30 because that line may never come in. So you start at 7:05 and you hope for the best.
All right. Well, it's not raining. I don't know if it's raining where you live, but
Nope.
let's take a little break, and we'll be right back with Mike Dimuzio in just a second. All right. We're back with Mike Dimuzio, 51 years with the Phillies in the ground crew, stadium operations, and facility areas. This guy has seen it all at Citizen Bank Park, and before that at the Veterans Stadium. We're talking about the Veterans Stadium days right now. Mike, I remember a couple of things after I started, which was way after you. 1989 was my first year in Philly, but I remember one time when it rained pretty hard and the dugout drains got clogged up, and the storeroom next to the dugout flooded, had about 4 feet of water in it. And Steve Lake was one of our catchers, and he brought his catcher's mitt to me, which weighed about 50 pounds. And he couldn't even carry it with one hand. And he wanted to know what I was going to do about it. All the equipment got flooded out down there that day. Another time we came back from a road trip, and Jack O'Malley, the third generation trucking company that used to bring in all the equipment and the luggage for the Phillies and all the other teams, was backing his truck up the tunnel, the service tunnel there on the lower level of Veterans Stadium, and he hit a water pipe, and all of a sudden it was like Niagara Falls. This was like a Sunday night around 11 o'clock at night, and I had the great distinction and the privilege, unfortunately, I'm being facetious here, to call Rusty Sweeney, the Eagles equipment manager, at his house and tell him what had happened. And it was pouring, the water was pouring into the Eagle locker room, and somehow it stopped right at the threshold of the Phillies clubhouse. And I don't think we got one drop in there. And I wasn't in very good terms with Rusty for a while after that one. Of course, I had nothing to do with it. But anyway, a lot of crazy things happened at the Vet. I know once the railing gave way in an Army-Navy game, and there was probably a little hijinks going on up in the stands that helped it give way. Also, let's talk about the Eagles and the courtroom, when they used to have the Judge McCafferty and an actual courtroom in the basement of the Vet.
First of all, the railing that gave way, the hijinks that had, I don't know that hijinks is the right word, but the CBS TV camera that was about 8 feet from the railing on the ground right behind the end zone, focused on the cadets, every cadet wanting to get in the picture so that obviously their friends could see them on TV. That, to me, is what helped contribute to all of these bodies leaning against the railing and the railings giving way. Right. In terms of, what was the other one you said? I apologize.
The courtroom.
Judge Seamus McCaffrey, the Eagles were having problems with their fans. The problem that we always had at the Vet, whether it was Phillies or the Eagles or whatever was happening there, is whenever someone got locked up, whether it was for fighting, for throwing something, whatever it was, there were 2 holding cells in the Vet on the main level, and the victor, the suspect, would be put in the holding cell. We then had to give all the information to the police. They would have to bring a police officer from the 3rd District in Philadelphia down to the ballpark to pick up the person, to take them back to the 3rd District where the hearing and everything was done, that back at the 3rd District, the 24th and Wolf Street. Our security guard would have to leave the ballpark. If there was a police officer involved in the apprehension, he or she would have to leave the ballpark. The other police officer from the district would have to come down. So it took all that time. The Eagles wanted to try to quicken that, so they had a courtroom put in on the basement level right next to the Phillies clubhouse. As a matter of fact, the room was an old storage room, which became part of the Phillies clubhouse eventually. But we had emptied the room out to make this transition. We gave the room to the Eagles to use for Judge McCaffrey. He made it like a regular courtroom. He sat higher than anybody else who came in the room. The robes were all there. The curtains were all there. There was never a jail in Veterans Stadium. Everybody talks about the stadium with the jail. No. There were these 2 holding rooms that were up on the main level. That's all they ever had. Anybody from the Eagles that had to go see Judge McCaffrey, they were given their determination right there, whether they were guilty, not guilty, whether they were fined. If they were sent to jail, they were taken out again to the South Detective Division at 24th and Wolf, and all the processing was done there. But they could get a hearing in front of Judge McCaffrey. He would fine them. He would, whatever it was that the verdict was, and they would be tossed out of the ballpark if that's what happened. But there never was a jail per se, whether it was prior to or after the judge. It was just that they had the judge come in for the hearing. And they did that for only 2 or 3 weeks, and then it was gone. So people thought it went on year after year. It was only done for 2 weeks, and then it was gone.
Well, I'm going to talk about something that lasted longer than 2 weeks. Evidently, there was a gentleman named Tom Garvey who apparently was managing the stadium parking lots at one time. And from 1979 to 1981, had an apartment in the stadium and wrote a book about it. You know anything about that?
I do not know Tom Garvey. I was not in stadium operations at that time. I didn't get in stadium operations until January of 81. I was still doing sales office and merchandising stuff. And if I don't ever recall, even after that happened, of an apartment being in the ballpark, if Tom said he was there and he had an apartment and it helped sell books, so be it. I'm not saying it didn't happen. Right. But I don't ever recall being there. The only apartment, not an apartment, I guess the room that I knew that had a couch that you could sleep on and a TV and a refrigerator belonged to Spanky, Gabrielle DeFelici Antonio, who was a city mason. Spanky worked for the city, and under the stairs of the third base deluxe box, he got some cinder blocks and built this room in there. And many a player used to say, I'm going down to take hitting practice at the batting cage, and never made the batting cage. Ended up in Spanky's room for an afternoon nap.
Right, exactly. Well, I had to spend a few nights at the vet when we came home late from a road trip or had a ridiculously long extra inning game or maybe a couple rain delays, and it wasn't that much fun. So I would have definitely not been interested in having an apartment in the ballpark. There's no doubt.
No, I agree with you. I spent, and my kids and wife can tell you, I spent many a night at the ballpark. We used to have an old TV studio right behind home plate on ground level when the vet was first built. And it was for post-game interviews. And the room technically never got used as a TV studio, but it was the coldest room in the building. And on overnight conversions, that's where the ground crew and the city workers used to hunker down and sleep a couple hours before they got up early in the morning and finished the conversion.
So, Mike, we're getting a little close on time here, but I want to ask you special memory of the vet. One special night, if you had to pick one night from all your time there, it could have been a game night, it could have not been a game night. What's your special memory of Veterans Stadium and your time there with the Phillies?
Well, obviously my biggest memory was the last day at the vet. I was fortunate enough to be chosen to carry the 1971 flag.
Right.
So I was the first one out in that parade going around, and I got to stand in the left field corner near where the ball girl usually stood. And every player, just about every player that walked by, I knew them, they knew me. We hugged, we cried, we shook hands, and just to see that entire program that Larry Shank, our PR vice president, had put together was special. From, the Tug McGraw finishing it at the end, and all the players who had ever played there and remembered it. I'd be surprised if you asked any of those players to give you a time that they remember, that majority of them won't remember that day. The other thing I remember, obviously, is everybody that I worked with. Obviously, I was there 51 years to the day, April 10th of 71, April 10th of 22, and there was nothing that I could have done without every usher, usherette, security guard, ticket taker, groundskeeper, that all made me look good. Just everything that they did, and everybody said, look what Mike got done. Well, Mike might have got it done, but Mike didn't necessarily do it. Mike had an awful lot of help to do it. And just all the people that were there that were very, very special to me. And I always said, when I pass away, I'd like a long line at my funeral. It's either a lot of people want to see me go, or I made an impact on a lot of people, and I hope I did the latter.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. So let me ask you now, Citizens Bank Park, how many employees actually worked under you at the end of your career there?
The end of my career, it really changed because.
All right. Well, then talk about in the midst of it all, when you were, full bore stadium ops, facility manager, just give me a ballpark, pardon the pun, estimate. How many security guards, how many, whatever it is, ground crew on a daily basis would be there under your direction?
There are close to 600 people, if not more, between host and hostess and security and greeters and groundskeepers and all those people. At one point, up until 1996, before Eric Tobin came into our office, Bernadette Mancy, back then they used the term secretary, was the secretary of ballpark operations, right. And I was the director, and we were the only two. So we handled all of that, as well as dealing with the city of Philadelphia, who owned the ballpark, and we had to go through them for some construction or maintenance issues. Eric came on in 96, then Sal DeAngelis came on after that, Sean Hoff came on after that, and we piecemeal added people. So by the time I was done, everybody else had taken everybody that worked for me. So I might have had about 10 people that were working for me. But by then, we then became the owners of the ballpark, and the facility management group technically was working under us. So instead of asking the city at the vet to do things for us, at least at Citizens Bank, we could tell the facility management group what we wanted and for them to do it for us.
Right, exactly. So I want to ask you your thoughts and your memories on this one. I was never in any weather meetings, but I was called into one in the middle of Game 5 of the World Series in 2008. And it was kind of a strange situation, pouring down rain in Philadelphia. They finally stopped the game after Tampa Bay tied the score. That's when the game stopped. Pat Gillick was our general manager at the time. He's in there. I'm sure you were in there. The umpires, the commissioner of baseball, all of his lieutenants are in the umpires room, huddling up, having this big meeting, trying to figure out what to do. And Pat Gillett comes to get me and goes, I need you to come with me to the umpires room. And I'm thinking, why would they need me over there, Right. So I go over there only to find out that they're going to call the game off, and we're not going to play tomorrow either. They already know we're not going to play the next day. And the kicker was the Tampa Bay team had no hotel. They had already checked out of their hotel. They had already packed everything. The luggage was already on the trucks. In fact, the Phillies luggage was already in the clubhouse in case we didn't win Game 5 because we were going to have to leave after the game. And so that's actually the last, when the game ended, the last 3 innings were played 48 hours later. But talk about how crazy it was that night when the game was called and then the next 48 hours.
Well, it was something that obviously had never happened before.
Yeah.
And again, all rain delays were usually done with the team. But as I said earlier, now Major League Baseball gets involved. And in this, with the World Series, I can understand it because it's their game. But it didn't matter. I was there in that room, but I was silent because it didn't matter whether I said it was going to rain or it was going to stop. They weren't going to listen to me. They were going to listen to the commissioner. And the commissioner wanted to cancel and move it for 2 days because the weather the next day wasn't that good. And I agree with him. But again, how do you not go at least say to the next day and then cancel the next day? I don't understand that because, again, you're trying to go on a weather forecast that we all know is never 100%. But they did it. It ended up working out for the Phillies. They ended up winning 2 days later, and the rest is history. But again, it was a New York decision. And when you came in the room, I guarantee you there were more than a dozen people in there trying to decide. Yeah, you couldn't even walk in the room. It's a room built for 4 umpires and the attendant, and that was it. And there were probably 18 or 19 people in there.
And when I got dropped on me, the Rays need a hotel.
Yeah.
That was a big order, but we found one down in Delaware.
I'm sure you did.
Down in Wilmington.
There you go.
And they were
always come through for you.
Hotel DuPont in Wilmington. Took them for a couple nights, and all was well. And it was so weird when the game finally did resume 2 days later. I never saw anything like it. They have the national anthem. The home team bats first because we were up.
Right.
And when we went to bat, the Rays had 2 guys warming up in the bullpen.
Yep.
It was the craziest night. I'll never forget that. And, of course, none of us will because the Phillies prevailed and won the 2008 World Series.
Yep. And the party started. And, you talked about remembrances. As I said, the last game there was the bigger remembrance for me. But obviously 1980 and 2008 were huge for everybody, for the city, for the players, for the workers. It was there's like a whole load is just taken off your shoulders. Not that I did anything, not that our game day employees did anything, but it just just knowing that all the work that you put in finally came to fruition, that this team won a championship, and at least in some little way, an usher and usherette greeter may have helped with that championship.
It takes everyone. It takes a village, as the saying goes. It takes way more than a village. It takes a big city, really, and lots of employees doing a lot of little things that no one ever sees. And if we didn't have all those people on board, it would be a total mess, no doubt about it.
And I was the village idiot.
Well, me too, most of the time. Mike, we could talk all night. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Been a lot of fun reminiscing, got so many cool stories. We could, as I said, we could probably make 5 shows out of this.
Yep.
But thanks a million for doing it.
Thank you, Frank. I appreciate you having me on. Thanks.
Great to have you on. Next week, Jamie Moyer, one of those 2008 world champions, 25 years as a major league pitcher. He will be on. So we hope you'll tune in, and we'll talk to Jamie and reminisce about his great career. And please like, follow, and subscribe to our show and the Believe Podcast Network. And we'll see you again next week.
Thanks, Frank.
Thank you for joining us on Planes, Trains, Buses, and Ballparks. I hope you enjoyed this great episode. Make sure you check out our back catalog. You can find it on YouTube or the Believe Network. Join us next week for another great guest. And always, play ball.